There are three books that I would love for you to consider reading, or at least listening to, in 2023. Hey, it's Scott Beebe with Business on Purpose. It's our desire that you might be liberated from business chaos so that you can make time for what matters most. And part of the way that we do that is through reading. The last 50 years in world history have led to some pretty influential inventions. And yet, still the top four inventions are the wheel, the nail, the compass, and then Gutenberg's printing press. There was a Dutch philosopher, Erasmus of Rotterdam, lived in chronological proximity to the printing press and was able to expand the influence of his own writing. Books were a non-negotiable for Erasmus. And he said this, "When I have little money, I buy books. And if I have any left, I buy food and clothes." Indeed, Erasmus was reported to have little money and so fought through hunger pains just for the pleasure of reading. Attributed to Mark Twain is that old saying that should serve as an accountability nudge to all of us as leaders. He or somebody said this, "The person who does not read good books has no advantage over the person who cannot read good books." So, in the spirit of that, here are three books I've read in the last year that I would challenge you to consider reading in 2023 in order to grow in fortitude. Book number one is a book by Guadara named Unreasonable Hospitality, the Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect. A friend and client, Chris Kornman of Entablature Construction and Entablature Realty out of New Orleans, recommended this book to me. And during a trip with my family, I left a trail of dog-eared and underlined pages of thoughts and ideas all throughout this book. Guadara walks through how he and a team took the famed 11 Madison Park restaurant from a nice New York City establishment and transformed it into the number one restaurant in the world, according to the world's 50 best restaurants, along with 4 stars from the always critical New York Times and a coveted 3 Michelin stars. Guadara caps a simple thesis of the book with this statement: "Whatever you choose to do, be in the hospitality business." The ultimate quote for busy business owners jumps off the page on page 116. "You don't want to have 100 keys. You win when you end up with only one, the key to the front door." I hope you'll make time. In fact, we've got a number of business teams making time this year to read through Will Guadara's Unreasonable Hospitality. The second book that I would recommend is a very introspective book, and it's a book by Arthur C. Brooks. He's a New York Times columnist, among other things, and he wrote this great book called From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. Now, if you're in your mid to late 30s, you heard me correctly, or above, it's time to begin reading this book. In 1995, Bob Buford published a book entitled Halftime, Moving from Success to Significance. And my friend Aaron Walker's built a business around that concept. And Bob Buford's book was good and helpful. Arthur Brooks' manifesto is deep and meaningful. Brooks confronts what he describes as the Striver'S Curse, a hidden source of anguish that wasn't just widespread, but nearly universal among people who have done well in their careers. Many successful business owners and key leaders build up capabilities and then feverishly work to avoid a decline in those capabilities. Arthur Brooks delivers a needed blow, a thoughtful alarm, in order to wake up the leader who is heading off into their second half of life. And that second half is actually starting earlier than we think. He said, "Here's the reality. In practically every high-skilled profession, decline sets in sometime between one's late 30s and early 50s. Sorry, I know that stings." Arthur C. Brooks's book, From Strength to Strength, invites you to prepare for a second curve, as he calls it, and a reminder that what got you to this point will not work to get you into the future, that you need to build some new strengths and new skills, and I'll add that most of those are built on wisdom. Brooks then devotes the rest of the book to uncovering those strengths and their rootedness in wisdom, and how those strengths will be diminished in the face of workaholism that keeps you tied to the fleetingness of worldly rewards that rust and evaporate, and they keep you tied because of your own fear of your own decline. From Strength to Strength is an important shot of interpersonal cold water and the complementary encouragement of a loving grandfather, all tied up into one. I highly recommend Arthur C. Brooks' From Strength to Strength. And now to the man who actually recommended the book to me, Dr. Tim Elmore is the third book that I want to recommend that you read this year. It's going to be an important book as it relates to generational diversity and particularly the workforce that you as an owner or a key leader are dealing with. Dr. Tim Elmore's book is called A New Kind of Diversity, Making the Different Generations on Your Team a Competitive Advantage. Now, we have culturally assumed diversity as a cross-section of race and skin color and less about the generational differences that illuminate the modern workforce. So Tim Elmore writes, millennials and Generation Z will make up 70%, that's right, 70% of the workforce by 2025. So we better get to know them. The older generations, people like me and above, say things like this: nobody wants to work anymore. And the younger generation has a bad work ethic. Well, Tim Elmore brings a teaspoon of humility to that idea when he reminds us that we're living in a different world right now. And we're the ones who gave birth to them and raised them. And if they truly were unready for the workforce, we must look in the mirror. Owners and leaders can moan, can complain, and can gripe about the new workforce, or we can embrace a new kind of diversity. Tim Elmore's books are loaded with heaps of helpful and digestible research, as is his podcast, that he skillfully then summarizes into implementable takeaways. It's a very helpful book. A couple weeks ago, I heard of a new 23-year-old director of marketing at a large company. That same company has a 64-year-old director of estimating. That is an unprecedented span of 4 generations working together, communicating with each other on one team. So it's going to be imperative that we all put in the work to understand generational tendencies, realities, nuances, and grow multilingual in speaking to others the way, as my first manager, Skip Clarkson, said, the way they wish to be spoken to, as we all push towards a unified end. Elmore recommends not just diversity training in the workplace, although important, but unity training. Of the books mentioned above, Business on Purpose receives no compensation or recommendation. Books are always a worthy investment of your time, attention, and leadership. You can pay us back by making the time to read. I thought this was interesting to end our time. Test Prep Insight reported that 48.5% of adults did not read a book in 2022. Let's change that, and let's all become book nerds in 2023. Part of our work at Business on Purpose is working with business owners and key leaders to hold them accountable to the things that will help liberate them from chaos so that you can make time for the things that matter, like reading. So go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/healthy to get a free assessment on the health of your business to get started. And let's see if Business on Purpose and books can help you get going to the goal and the vision that you have this year.